Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me here today. My name is Rebecca Ferdman with the LA County Chief Sustainability Office. And I was really excited to have that amazing global perspective, amazing keynote address. Thank you for that. And this sort of takes that and brings it to a level. So we got the big picture look. I'm going to be talking about Los Angeles County. So first, a little bit about my office, the Los Angeles County Chief Sustainability Office. We're a small policy shop. There's only like 6 of us, but we're a catch-all for carrying out all the priorities of the Board of Supervisors, the LA County Board of Supervisors that are related to sustainability policy. And in particular, we are charged with carrying out our county sustainability plan, which I'll get into what that plan is in a little bit. So before we dive into talking about LA County's climate footprint and also its climate action plan associated with that, I wanted to talk a little bit about how climate action relates, at least in my perspective, and I also want to provide a little bit of context for why LA County in particular faces such a unique challenge when it comes to climate planning, and also a unique opportunity compared to a lot of other places that might be undertaking, of course, similar planning efforts related to carbon footprint and climate action. So some of you may recognize this. This is a picture of downtown Los Angeles, 1973. It is not a cloudy day. That is smog. And as you can see, it is so thick, you can hardly see through it. Many early environmental initiatives stemmed from problems like this. It was about environmental health, clean air, clean soil, how our environment was impacting our communities, our health, and our lives. And that's all really still a vital part of what sustainability means today. But we know also that we're now more aware of not just the local effects, but some of the global ramifications of that pollution, right? So the topic of the day, climate change. So from my perspective, from the perspective of the Chief Sustainability Office, regional sustainability planning has to address both. We need to be cutting carbon, doing our part as global citizens, but still taking action to protect the local environmental health of especially of our most vulnerable communities in LA County. So even though I'm on carbon footprint over the next few minutes here, I do like to keep this in mind. For me, for the CSO, it's all about how what we do is impacting those people we serve, their lives and their health. We can look at solutions that reduce carbon, but we also always need to be looking for that community benefit perspective, for the health and equity perspective. We don't want to be repeating those mistakes of the past. We want to know that good solutions really are multi-benefit solutions. We're looking for solutions that are cross-cutting across multiple fields to solve multiple problems at the same time. And the type of coordination, the type of collaboration that's needed for those types of solutions is really complex in LA County. LA County really is, I think, I'm a little biased, a very truly unique place. A lot of people don't know that there are actually 88 cities in LA County. There's the city of LA, but there are Long Beach, Pasadena, Beverly Hills, Santa Monica, Culver City, where we are today. Those are some of the ones that a lot of people know about, but there's also Hawaiian Gardens and Pico Rivera, Sierra Madre, El Monte. And then on top of those 88 cities, we have our unincorporated county areas, right? Those are the places within the county that are not a part of one of those 88 cities. Places like Marina del Rey, Avocado Heights, huge parts of the Antelope Valley in the north part of the county, right? This is also the ancestral home of the Tongva, the Tataviam, the Serrano, the Quiche, and the Chumash people who have lived here for generations and generations and are still here stewarding the land, practicing their culture today. 1 million people live here. That's 1 out of every 4 Californians, 1 in every 33 Americans. Over 200 languages are spoken in LA County. We have 75 miles of coastline, but also mountains, forests, deserts, wetlands. We're actually one of just a few global biodiversity hotspots in the entire world, which means that there are a significant number of species that live here in this region that don't exist anywhere else. LA County is larger than several US states, and if it were a country, it would be in the G20. So you can sort of start to see where coordination becomes a really important part of working in the county. And we have to keep in mind, when we're thinking about the impacts of the environmental challenges that we face, those that are related to traditional environmental issues like clean air and clean water and clean soil, but also those hazards that are associated with a changing climate. When we think about the impacts of those environmental hazards, they are not distributed equally across the entire county, right? Instead, they are intersecting, accumulating again and again in the same places, and of course, disproportionately in disadvantaged communities and in communities of color. So we can zoom out and sort of see what this looks like in practice. The map on the right there is from a tool called CalEnviroScreen, which looks at pollution burden, but other social. Oh.
That one keeps buzzing.
Are we buzzing? Thank you. That's a hot tip. Okay, I'm so used to my webcam. I don't, in person. There's all these different considerations. We are 100% remote at my office in the county, so it's a real treat to be among humans. That is much better this way. All right, so CalEnviroScreen, the map that's in red and green, showing pollution burden, other social factors. And when you're looking at it, first of all, you see that it's not all one weird shade of orange, right? There are places that are more impacted and places that aren't. But you can even also start to sort of see the routes of the freeways. You can see the impact of the ports, right? And so that's the echo of some long ago and still current policies, redlining policies, but other racist and exclusionary practices that work to keep those environmental pollutions acting in those same communities in the past, but also in the present today, and unless we change things, like going into the future as well, right? And not only are all of the burdens impacting and intersecting, but they are accelerating, they're accumulating, they're compounding over time, and that comes down to climate change. This other map on the left here, this is a map from a tool that our office created called the LA County Climate Vulnerability Assessment, and it combines climate projection data with a lot of social sensitivity and demographic indicators to show and pinpoint where people might be at greatest risk from the hazards of climate change. And you can see, we need the data. We need to be able to show it, but it's no surprise. It's the same communities again and again impacted by those traditional health hazards are also still going to be impacted in the same way by these new and currently occurring now climate hazards, right? So we know climate change is going to exacerbate impacts on our communities and disproportionately affect low-income communities and communities of color, not just in the future, but already today. So now that we have all that context in mind about how sustainability relates to climate, how it relates to public health, how it relates to basic and sort of deeply entrenched issues of equity and justice in LA County, I think we can now turn to the topic at hand, which is our carbon footprint and climate action for the county. And I want to start by talking about a couple of the plans at issue here. First, the Our County Plan. I mentioned this briefly at the beginning, but this is the plan that guides sustainability policy and implementation for the county. It has 12 cross-cutting goals, 159 individual actions, covers a wide variety of sustainability topics, including carbon, but everything from energy and water to food to health and housing and waste. It's all in there. It's a high-level strategic framework and not a detailed implementation plan, and not a part of the county's general plan, which is an important sort of legal distinction. So as I said, the Our County Plan was created by my office, the Chief Sustainability Office, and overseeing the implementation of that plan is one of the main things that we do. But the plan I'm going to be focusing on for the most of the rest of this talk here is actually a different plan, the 2045 Climate Action Plan for LA County. This plan is actually created and overseen by our amazing Department of Regional Planning, so it's not from my office. So I gotta provide that caveat. It's not my plan, but I do love the plan. And it's also different from the R County plan because it does become part of LA County's general plan, meaning it will become legally binding policy with all that comes along with that, including, compliance under state laws like CEQA. So it's a much more highly specific and detailed implementation plan compared to the R County plan, although it is still at a very high level. Another important difference between these two plans is that while the R County plan is intended to be regional, the Climate Action Plan, is for unincorporated areas of the county only. And again, just a refresher, what that means, unincorporated areas of the county, any part of LA County that is not included in one of those 88 cities. So for some context about what that means, LA County, as I said, has about 10 million residents. About 1 million of those people live in unincorporated county communities. And so by comparison, the city of LA, which is our largest city, has about 4 million people. If unincorporated county was a city, it would be the second largest city in the county. So just a little bit of caveat that we're talking about unincorporated footprint here. All right, so here it is, the slide that you maybe were expecting when I told you I was going to talk about carbon footprint. LA County's unincorporated areas carbon footprint in one sort of handy visual. As you can see, there is a little bit of a jargon issue on this slide. IPPU stands for Industrial Process and Product Use. AFOLU stands for Agricultural, Forestry, and Other Land Uses. But I think what probably will jump out at you when you see a slide like this, of course, what most people see is sort of this big old chunk here. More than half of our emissions come from transportation. This includes fuel combustion, of course, but also the electricity consumption and the emissions associated with that are generated from anything to do with transportation. Our passenger vehicles, goods movement, public transit systems like bus and rail, as well as off-road vehicles. The next biggest chunk that you see there, stationary energy. This does include sort of what it sounds like. To me, when I hear that, it sounds like energy generation facilities, and that's a part of that. But actually, by far, the biggest chunk of that stationary energy category, may not surprise you to learn for those of you who think a lot about carbon, it's our buildings, residential and commercial buildings, and the emissions associated with that. Things like space heating and cooling, water heating, and cooking. After that, you can see waste is the next largest chunk of it, followed by those industrial processes, and then the agriculture, forestry, and other land use category. And again, just a reminder that this isn't accounting for unincorporated LA County only, but I think you'll find, and you may already know, that this general pattern holds true in most places regionally. It can sometimes be switched, where stationary might be the largest and transportation the second largest. I was just in a meeting with West Hollywood, and I think that's the case in their climate action plan. But really the important takeaway here is that the dominance of these categories in terms of overall footprint, transportation, and buildings. So because of that, do you know how to fix that one? Who is it who told me the thing? Yes. Off and on. Always works. All right. So, transportation and buildings. That's where I was. Obviously, two big categories. I want to drill down into them. This chart is showing us the change in GHG emissions between 2015 and 2018, which is the most recent data we have and the data that's used in this version of the CAP. And as you can see, emissions did decrease in that period over that span of time for both of those categories. And the reason for those decreases, I think, helps sort of highlight some overarching themes that are important to keep in mind when we're thinking about carbon footprint for LA County. In the case of transportation, so that's that first category there, the decrease in carbon footprint is due primarily to vehicle turnover. So vehicle by vehicle, we are slowly replacing our fleet with more fuel efficient and even with electric models. That's in a lot of ways a really hard fought change, right? It depends on new technology, new policies, social and cultural preferences, consumer behavior, just plain like money and time, year after year, car after car, replace our fleet. Stationary energy, it's a little bit of a different picture in some ways. That decrease is in large part due to increasing levels of renewable energy being supplied to the grid. And I don't want to misconstrue that. That is also a hard-fought battle. It's a huge political, logistical, technological lift. But here on the ground, to the average LA resident, when we're thinking about that change in stationary energy in that category, what does it look like? Someone is at home, they flip a light switch, and the light turns on. Same as it always did. It's still electricity. Nothing changes on the consumer end when you change the source of the electricity. And that's why you probably have heard calls to electrify everything. I'm sure most people are familiar with that phrase by now. It's not that electricity is inherently clean, and electricity is only as clean as the source of its generation. But the reason why it's important is that once we're working with electric equipment, whether it's that light bulb, whether we're now talking about an electric car or an electric stovetop, we can turn any of those energy uses into a zero carbon use just by doing exactly what we're already doing here, which is increasing the net level of renewable energy that's being supplied to the grid. So what does it take to actually get to carbon neutrality in LA County? The CAP, the Climate Action Plan, breaks it down into these 5 strategy categories that you see: energy supply, transportation, building, energy and water, waste, and our friend AFOLU, agriculture and forestry. Obviously, fortunately, maybe for all of us, I don't have time to get into the details of what all of those strategies contain. So I do encourage you to check out the CAP, sort of like in its full glory, and see all the details. But for now, for today, I'm just gonna focus on what the CAP calls its core strategies. And here they are, the core strategies: T6, ES2, E1, T8, and W1. Sounds very technical, but what is special about the core strategies, what makes them the core strategies, is that out of the 25 strategies in the CAP, more than 90 implementing options in the CAP, the GHG emissions targets for 2030, 2035, and 2045, those targets can actually be successfully achieved by reaching the performance objectives of just these 5 core measures. So that's powerful stuff. And just as we saw that most of the county's emissions come from transportation, come from buildings, most of the county's emissions saving potential, these core measures, are also a part of that category, right? Makes sense. So 4 out of 5 of these core measures have to do with either transportation or buildings. And again, electrification is a key theme here. Electrification of our transportation, that's T6 there. Electrification of our buildings, E1. And then the clean zero carbon grid, right, to go along with that. That's ES2, procurement of zero carbon electricity to power all that newly electrified infrastructure. And the county is already showing really strong leadership when it comes to that zero carbon energy supply. The county helped create and is now a participant in the Clean Power Alliance, which is a community choice aggregation program that gives participating jurisdictions, including the county, but many other cities and the counties as well, it gives them the ability to increase the proportion of their energy that comes from renewable sources, just as we've been talking about. So through the Clean Power Alliance, the county recently opted up to procure 100% renewable energy, and that began in October 2022. So beginning in October 2022, all customers in unincorporated areas of LA County automatically began receiving that 100% carbon-free energy. That has had a greater impact on LA County's carbon footprint than any other single action could have had. And not only when that flip got switched in October 2022, right, when that energy started being supplied, it's really ongoing gift that keeps on giving, because as more of our equipment and infrastructure becomes electrified, such as through these other actions, the impact of the change of the clean energy only becomes more and more magnified, supplying that clean energy to this electrified infrastructure into the future. So I think the CAP, and again, it's not my CAP, I think it does a really great job of sort of laying out simply and clearly the steps that we need to take or that we could take to get to where we need to go. And I love that about the CAP. But I think the CAP does not also then shy away from the tough problems. And I think a lot of us know that many of these measures are a lot easier said than done. For example, the elephant in the room, E1, transition existing buildings to all electric. I think many of us know that the technology is here for fully electric buildings, right? Electric space and water heating, electric clothes drying, even electric cooking technology has improved a lot over the last few years. But that's, for a lot of times for new buildings. Existing buildings that already run on gas infrastructure, that's a hard problem. It's a question of technology, yes, but also of infrastructure, of policy and politics, funding, training, knowledge, equity, and not to minimize just plain social and cultural preferences. So this tough problem, the problem of existing buildings, it's going to be a focus of our office, the Chief Sustainability Office, over the coming months, and I think it's something that many people working on decarbonization are taking a close look at right now, especially in California. So, even if we find solutions to all those hard problems that the CAP sort of identifies, implement all its strategies, even if we meet all the targets, which by the way are, you can see them there, it's like 40% below 2015 emissions by 2030, 15% below 2015 levels by 2035, and more than 80% below 2015 levels by 2045. Even if we achieve all that, we still have this aspirational goal down in the corner here, carbon neutrality by 2045. So that little delta there between the target and the aspirational goal, what does that mean? This little delta is called the residual emissions. These are the emissions that we just can't model away with the existing technologies and frameworks that we have. Places like certain types of vehicles and equipment, certain manufacturing facilities and processes, places like landfills, wastewater treatment, fertilizer use. Tough problems. The CAP, the Climate Action Plan, is going to be updated every 5 years, and as we do that, we expect to chip away at this residual through things like changes in community-wide activities, such as waste-generating behaviors, thinking about maybe LA's new composting program, but also changes in state-level regulations and incentives, and also potentially changes in technology. So it's a fast-changing field, and there's a lot of opportunity for progress in a variety of these harder-to-reach areas. So as I said, I'm really a fan of the CAP and this framework of the 5 strategies and then the 5 core strategies, because to me, it feels like kind of an optimism-inspiring framework in a lot of ways. It takes this big, complex, insurmountable thing and turns it into a really quite understandable and approachable, if still quite difficult, problem to solve. But I want to stop and think back to the beginning of this presentation. I don't want to lose sight of the universe of everything else that's in the CAP outside of those 5 core strategies, right? It's not just about identifying the measures that cut the most carbon, because a lot of the strategies in the CAP really do have other potential benefits to people's lives. So we can't just think about it from a carbon perspective. We need to think about it from a community health perspective, an equity perspective, an environmental justice perspective. So to that end, the CAP includes strategies that do cut carbon, but also provide other benefits. Things like planting trees where we need them, conserving water, diverting waste from landfills, conserving and restoring wildlands, and much more. So the last thing I will leave you with is, if you're interested in learning more, how you can get involved. The draft cap is out now. You can find it in its like full glory on the DRP website, and I encourage you to do that. The comment period is open now, and it runs through May 15th of this year. And I would be remiss if I didn't also bring it back to our county plan. Again, that's that general countywide plan that my office administers. We actually have an annual engagement process. Every year we release a progress report and an updated list of priority actions for implementation in the coming year. We take public comment on those priorities every year, usually in the summer, sometime around July or August. So you can visit our website to learn more and to keep an eye out for when that engagement period opens up this year. All right, well, that's all I have for you guys today. So I think hopefully I have time for a couple of questions if anyone has any. Oh, a lot of questions. I think I saw your hand first, yes. Oh.
Yeah, who, what?
Or you could, why don't you, oh, I don't know who was first.
Oh, hi, Ann Carpenter. So thanks for the presentation. My question is, you're looking at, well, first of all, 2045 is way out there, but in the assumptions on many of these difficult, hard to abate areas, how much are you relying on the individual behavior, and how much are you looking at larger players, big county itself, et cetera, because those are very different paths on changing things?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I want to caveat my answer to this question, and likely the answer to many of these questions with, again, that I can't take credit for the plan. It's not my plan, and I'm not necessarily the expert on the details of the plan. That being said, this plan focuses mainly on county levers. So actions, strategies, policies that the county can take that would achieve these measures. So it doesn't rely on individual behavior. It relies on policy mechanisms. It relies on county procurement policies. A lot of the actions are even stratified into sort of whether it's a county-specific measure, so thinking about buildings owned by counties, we have a lot more control over the buildings that we actually own. We have other types of controls over buildings that are located in unincorporated areas. And then we have influence over buildings in cities, but not necessarily control, right? So the CAP sort of lays out all those different sort of spheres of influence and relies on the things that we are able to control directly as much as possible.
Hi. Thank you for the First Nations land acknowledgement. Starting that off, that's great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. My question is regarding something you haven't touched, but I think it's part of your overall talk. So I co-founded the first climate change carbon reduction technology fund on the planet back in 2004. And I thought I started to acquire knowledge and understand things more. Then I moved to Culver City, just at the end of the street, 600 feet from the world's largest urban oil field. And I was opened up to a whole other part of LA I didn't realize was in existence as part of our carbon footprint. So I started attending CAP meetings for the community surrounding the oil field. And what's happening now in the last year is the first community healthcare study that's being done by CAP to actually find out how sick people are getting from the pollution emissions, particularly the oil fields and refineries, because there's many of them in LA. And so you didn't touch on that, but you had that wonderful map, with the different color codes as far as where the hotspots were with emissions. Can you speak a little bit about if there are any other community surveys being done for connecting health with emissions? And also, there's a lot of AI being used in that. The vehicles that the city is funding are actually using artificial intelligence, are using acquire the data and then compute the data. So if you could talk to the AI component as well.
Yeah, definitely. So as I kind of alluded to a couple times, we have two plans that I was talking about here. One is the CAP, and the other is the Our County plan. And the Our County plan is the plan my office does, and it has 12 goals. One of the goals of the Our County plan, one of the big overarching goals, something that we heard from community members again and again, fossil fuel-free LA County, and that means all oil and gas extraction and operations everywhere across the county being sunsetted, being done. That's an aspirational goal, but we have chunked off pieces of it, and we're working towards it now. The piece that my office is working most closely on right now has to do with idled and abandoned and orphaned wells, capping them, and then creating a just transition strategy for those workers in those fields to move them into cleaner jobs or other sorts of accelerated retirement, variety of strategies. And then, of course, then looking to the remediation of those sites and thinking about the impacts to the frontline communities around those sites. That's just oil wells. And I heard you talking about also other types of, oil facilities, extraction and other types of processes. That's a next step for us. We're not there yet, but it's something that we're exploring, and especially the health aspect of it. We work really closely with our Department of Public Health. One thing that's special about the county, or maybe different, confusing about the county, is that, as I said, the county has control over unincorporated areas. Something that maybe a lot of people learned during the pandemic is that one place where that's not true is in the Department of Public Health. The Department of Public Health of LA County is actually the Department of Public Health for all of the cities in the county, minus, I think, Pasadena and Long Beach might have their own. So health is an important angle for us, not only because it's something that we care about at our office, we always care about the human perspective, but because it's a place where the county has more control over areas that are not just in our unincorporated areas. So it's something that our Department of Public Health is exploring. And I encourage you to check out our Just Transition work on our website. I think we just came out with a first round of a report from our Just Transition Task Force, which is joint between the city of LA and the county. And they're moving into their sort of next phase about how they're going to implement those recommendations. But again, that's just around oil wells. So I think that it's a great place to get plugged in and stay tuned about what some of those next phases might look like. Oh, I'm sorry. I accidentally forgot that because I don't know anything about it. I'm like in the wrong room. I'm sure someone else here knows a lot more than me about the AI perspective on that, but that's exciting to know about. I would love to learn more and how we can incorporate it because, I think as you mentioned, numbers have a lot of power, and if we can get the data fast and cheaply, it changes the equation. We don't have to wait 2 years for our assessment or our study. If we can have AI crank that out, it really does change what you're able to do and the speed you're able to do it at. So I would love to learn more about it.
Hi. Oh, sorry. Great presentation. Thank you. I was curious, and maybe it relates back to this last answer. When you're doing the analysis and planning, did you consider other greenhouse gases like methane?
Yes. So it applies a conversion for a variety of other gases and converts them into a carbon accounting. Yeah, including methane.
I have a question on EV charging stations. The governor says that by 2035, they're not going to be allowing gas-powered cars to be manufactured anymore. That's a great goal to have. If the EV charging stations are not there to the extent that they need to be there, how is that going to work? You have to have thousands of charging stations. Work. And have long lines.
Well, luckily, I don't have to fix it myself. But yes, that's a hard problem. It's something that a lot of folks are working on, and I think you mentioned all the new sources of funding, lots of earmarks at the state and federal level for expanding our EV infrastructure access. What I like about that question is I think the problem of providing EV charging access is actually an opportunity to increase equity in a lot of ways. Because I think if you convert the amount of money you might spend on gas into the amount of money you might spend on charging an electric car, you come out way ahead. But only people who have access to chargers in their homes can access that benefit. And so it's about public chargers. You could charge somewhere else, but I think most people want to charge overnight in their homes, whether they live in a multifamily apartment or whether they live in a single family home. Yeah, or if you go on a car trip, then you need it outside of the home too. But I think that on a day-to-day basis, the big problem is at residential units, and it's at businesses as well where people can charge. And so ramping up EV infrastructure, is something that's going to be part of discussions around electrifying building codes. So thinking about the new construction and existing buildings and the levers that we have to decarbonize the appliances that are part of the buildings. When we have those conversations, can we also have conversations about what type of charging infrastructure should be required and how we can keep up, right? And I think also, to my point earlier about always wanting to think about a multi-benefit solution. I hate the example of EV cars because it feels so one-to-one to me. We have this problem of cars. We're going to solve this problem by having electric cars. But a lot of the problems that are associated with cars are still associated with electric cars, right? The noise, the road dust, the accidents, the safety issues. It's all still there. So I think we also need to think about VMT, vehicle miles traveled. We need to think about multimodal transit. We need to think about density of jobs near housing. And we need to think about how we can use electric vehicles as tools for resilience. So how do we get people to adopt them? Can we, make them a source of a battery power for a car instead of installing like a brand new battery with all the chemicals that go into that? So I think that there are a lot of things we can do to encourage uptake and also to require it. Lots of carrots and sticks and lots of money associated with those carrots and sticks coming in the next few years.
All right, we got one more question, and then we're going to go into a break before we go into our lightning talks. Here's the last one.
Can you hear me? All right. I was just struck. One of the first things you said was that your office is 6 people, and I can imagine that there's a tremendous amount of planning and oversight and also persuasion, as you said. There's probably some stakeholders that you have some authority over and many other stakeholders you have to, twist arm, persuade, et cetera. So I'm just curious, both in your office and more generally, do you feel like public sector is dedicating enough resources to this work? It seems like among the most important things we're doing in the county. So do you think it needs to grow in size and funding in other counties?
There's only ever one answer to that question. Of course, we're not dedicating enough. I have to say, though, the county has ramped up. So our office used to be even smaller. It was originally 3. We're double the size than we used to be, and hopefully we'll be staffing up even more in the coming years. But I think what's really important about how the county is approaching sustainability, and I can't speak for other cities in the county or organizations, but just the government of the county of LA itself, is that, yes, our sustainability office is small and hopefully growing, but we have a counterpart sustainability office in our public works department. There's a sustainability team at Parks and Recreation. There are sustainability professionals at our internal services division. So it's not just us trying to bring everybody along. The county is making sure that every department has its own sustainability professionals, their own sustainability goals and priorities. They're able to bring the perspective of the priorities of each of those individual departments to the table when we're talking about collaborating around some of these goals, because a lot of the things that I'm talking about, EV charging, building decarb, just transition, something that I'm working on is our sort of urban forest management plan. You would be surprised at how many counties at the department actually plant and manage their own trees, right? All of these efforts require huge amounts of coordination just at the county, let alone then the next layer of coordination where we need to be talking to cities, we need to be talking to community-based organizations, we need to be talking to residents. So there's a lot of collaboration and coordination involved, but we're not alone. We have those partners at the county, and we have those partners in the community and at the city level that are helping us do this all together. So do we need more resources? Do we need more people? Always. But we're doing a lot with what we have.